morning, everyone, and welcome to Hit and Hustle from IRSportsDaily.com. I'm your host, Greg Flammang, and with me, as always, is Jamie Uyeyama, Jamie University. It is February 7th, 2023, and we are here to talk about Notre Dame offensive coordinator search. There's names out there. Byron Leftwich got dropped yesterday. Do you know who it was, Jamie? This is such bad. I should give credit.
It was somebody from 247. I think they're national.
I'll check it out.
Like a host or something.
Yeah.
Sorry for.
I should have looked that up, but that it was reported out by we'll say someone from 247. It was a nice young lady, I assume. Okay. She put it out, and so he's looking to interview at Notre Dame, and that looks to happen sometime this week probably. But there are a lot of names out there, and I think as we're gonna get talking, I don't know that there's a favorite. I don't know that there's even a group of favorites, right? At least publicly, that's out there. I think Notre Dame wants this pretty close to the vest, as I think people can understand, because it's a big hire and it's a big move that Marcus Freeman needs to make. So he's gonna take his time, but he's gonna work with a little bit of urgency because he's got spring practice coming on, and you want someone in the position, right? Not just for spring practice, but you want someone there. You need someone, a sounding board for your offense and that sort of thing. So we're going to be talking about that. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. If this is your first time, as Raison says, the like button, it needs your attention. It needs your caressing. It needs your special attention that you can give it. We're coming up on Valentine's Day. It's a time to give the person you're into some special attention. And right now it's the like button and it's the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell so you know when we're going live, whenever we go live, because it's breaking news season, folks. So you're going to want to be ready for that. And if you're on replay, do the same thing. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we appreciate everybody. All right, Jamie, let's talk. And first, I want to start with one thing, because I brought it up in the tweet, and I think everybody, and this is myself included, we need to approach hiring season with some humility, right? Because I feel like, like Byron Leftwich, right? He's going to interview, and there was a tweet that went around yesterday about how Dan Orlovsky was talking about how Leftwich ran an archaic offense, right? He needed to go ran an archaic offense and that sort of thing. And I quote tweeted, it's like, I don't like that, right? I don't like that someone's saying that right now.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that I did not watch a ton of Tampa Bay Buccaneers football this year, right? Like I didn't. I don't know. And I know the year before, Dan Orlovsky sent a tweet that said he was going to be a head coach soon in the NFL, right? So these things,
big flip.
It's a big flip, right? And the other part too is like schemes don't change, right? Maybe the results change, maybe based on a number of factors, but schemes don't. Right, he's gonna be running the same stuff in 22 as he was in 21. Right, like that's just how it is. So I would say I think we all need to, myself included, we need to approach the hiring process and all that with some humility. Right, we don't know. There's going to be a lot of names that come out that none of us have truly vetted, have truly looked at, truly have a strong opinion on. Right, so I think we need to have humility. Obviously, we can have opinions. It's fine, right? That's what this is for, right? We talk about our opinions, but I don't like Joe Moorhead, right? Like they all have pros and cons, right? Everyone does. Yeah. If it's Joe Moorhead, right? He's been a popular name that's been thrown around too. So, so what's your take, Jamie? Well, what's your feeling on, I guess, Byron Leftwich? He was in the Super Bowl recently. I think there was Bruce Arians left, and I think there was, some cause and effect there. But what do you think, Jamie?
Well, okay, so this is true. Like they were, this last season was not a good year for their offense, but they were also first in DVOA, which is Football Outsiders metrics, the year before, and the year before that, when they won the Super Bowl, they were third. So they're a top 3 offense in the NFL. 2 years in a row. So that's true. Byron Leftwich was calling the plays. Bruce Arian wasn't calling the plays, so that wasn't a thing. So I don't think that's something that Philip Smith brings up. I don't think Leftwich, he deserves the credit for that kind of thing. But I think also, too, this year they had a ton of injuries. Chris Godwin was coming back off of pretty serious injury. He's not the same guy that he was. They didn't have Gronk this year. That's a pretty big loss considering he's, maybe the best tight end of all time. Still a pretty good player. They had huge issues up front on the offensive line. They're missing several guys.
Yeah.
And the line was bad. So that's part of it. But, I was talking with a guy that I'm friendly with who covers the Carolina Panthers, and he's a big NFL draft guy. He's a guy that I chat with every once in a while, whatever, on Twitter. And I was asking him about Leftwich, because to my understanding is Leftwich is a guy that and Arians, because he's from the Arians tree, obviously, right? That they are our dudes are better than your dudes, and that's how we win, right? Mm-hmm. That's how we win. Like, we find the matchups, we exploit them, and then that's how you win, right? And I think that certainly not a bad thing when you got the talent. But
Notre Dame's not really in that place right now.
That's my concern about Notre Dame, because, well, that will work in 10 out of 12 games or whatever, right? Or 9 out of 12 games or whatever, right?
Yeah.
What about those other games?
Right.
When you don't have the dudes.
The games that we care about.
And so what about when you don't have those dudes?
Yeah.
And what about when you get into the college football playoff? And so that is something that, in a sense, if you're at like a team that's loaded with talent and you have that, but like, if I just look at, say, like what Tommy Rees had the last 3 years, they didn't have the matchup guys that they could just say, right, hey, let's get this. Like, he had to scheme up a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
He had a horrible O-line in 2021 that had to like readjust and completely change the script of what they did. Right. They had real problems at receiver where they didn't know like who was going to be there at receiver in 2020. Right. They had severe quarterback limitations this year. Right. So, and I think that's part of, and maybe, Marcus Freeman is in the process and the staff is in the process of getting them in a position where that's not going to be the case, where they are going to have all these dudes. And we know, like we've talked about how they recruited so well. But in saying that, I think maybe like 2-3 years, 2 years from now, or like even a year from now, when you're like, okay, we got Tobias Merriweather, and he's full-fledged dude. And, we're going to find that matchup and we're going to throw like a bunch of bombs to him, right? Just a bunch of go balls. And Braylon James, we're going to bunch of go balls and all these guys. And you have these skill talent. So it's when I'm talking about matchups, I'm talking about like our dudes are better than your dudes. It's like mostly skill talent, right? And so especially when they're going to a season when it's like, who are the dudes for Notre Dame? I mean, Michael Mayer was the dude, and now who else is there? I don't know. To me, that's why I would have big questions about Byron Leftwich. Not to mention that whenever somebody's like, hey, I have interest in the job. Not to say that's a bad thing, he has interest, but then when that's leaked, I'm like, what's really going on here? If this is the thing. So I don't know. I just, he's someone who wouldn't be at the top of my list based on how he's had success in the NFL and how that would translate to Notre Dame. And not that I don't think he's like a bad, I don't think he's a bad coach or anything like that. I just think that I don't know how great of a fit he would be at Notre Dame. And another thing, lowest play action rate in the NFL last year. That's not encouraging. I don't like that at all.
No.
And I think, I think that's just bad in any level of football. And I think especially when Notre Dame, which I think as a team built to be probably next year, I would say they're built again to be more run heavy. I don't think that's a good thing.
Yeah, and never been in college other than when he was a player, so that's not great, right? Never recruited, never like who's his signature quarterback development thing. I don't think he developed Tom Brady. Like you have Tom Brady, and it's like, okay, you build an offense around him, and that's great, like you said, and you take matchups, and our guys are better than your guys and that sort of thing. But like college is different, and Notre Dame isn't in that place. And who is he the person to take Notre Dame to that place? It's tough for me to see that. If he can sell, Marcus Freeman on that, then I mean, we'll have to see. But there's too many red flags, in my opinion, and better candidates for the position. Right? He's
recruiting, developing.
Yeah,
there's a lot of.
They're all questions that you can't know until he gets here, right? And it's like he would have
to blow you
it.
away in the interview.
Yeah, like he would have to sell it, but it's like there's just no track record, and it's hard for me to see him taking that taking that leap. Like when I say he, I mean Marcus, right? Like that's just it's too much. It's too much of a chance he's got to take. All right, Jamie. So you wrote an article on prerequisites for the position, and let's talk about that, and let's kind of go over who you think fits most of these boxes, right? Like who you think is the best fit for what you think Notre Dame needs, and we'll go from there.
Okay, so I listed like basically. I mean, the one thing that kind of goes into with Leftwich is like you have to fit at Notre Dame, you have to fit in college football. So it's like those are question marks for him. They're really kind of question marks for a lot of these guys. So that is like almost like the unknown for a lot of us, right? So let's just say Joe Moorhead. Does he want to go back to like a big time college job? Is he cool with being a coordinator again? He might just want to be a head coach and at a small school and just kind of do his own thing, or build his thing back up and then maybe become a head coach again somewhere else. Like we don't know that. Those are unknowns. You just don't know that. So it's like, I mean, we don't need to go into that thing about how they would fit at Notre Dame, because there's like, I mean, we could just be talking about, well, I mean,
right?
Does Brian Johnson like this or whatever? Does he want to come back? I mean, we don't know. We'll find out, right? But the main three things are: one, you must adapt to the current personnel for Notre Dame. Two, you have to produce explosive plays. You have to have like a history of producing explosive plays, as with the offenses that you've been in, and a strong track record with quarterbacks. I think that's all more than fair for considering that Notre Dame is looking specifically for an offensive coordinator and also a quarterback coach, right? So I think when you look at that, and I look at, who checks kind of all those boxes, and I think Brian Johnson, who is the Philadelphia Eagles quarterback coach, who coaches Jalen Hurts, helped develop him there. He's been there the last 2 years. We've seen Hurts really take a big jump in his development, right? We see kind of what the Eagles run with Sirianni and what they're doing and how they utilize the offense, how they utilize the tight end like Dallas Goedert. He's from the Dan Mullen coaching tree, right? We just saw what they did at Florida with their usage and what they did with Kyle Pitts at tight end. So that's like, I mean, Notre Dame, you can't recruit all these great future NFL tight ends and not utilize them in your offense. And we know he has a history of that, right? So he has a history of doing that, a history of like, being in these type of offenses that do that. So, I mean, that's check for him. Produce explosive plays. That Florida offense where he was the coordinator. I mean, Dan Mullen certainly was a huge part of it, but I mean, obviously he's a big part of it too. It was the most explosive offense in college football, more explosive than that 2020 Alabama offense that beat Notre Dame. That's considered one of the best. That Alabama offense considered one of the best offenses of all time. It's like if that didn't come right after the LSU offense, it might be considered the best offense of all time. That's just kind of where that Florida offense was kind of right there with it. I mean, the rest of the team wasn't, but that offense, certainly was. And then you have, what I just mentioned with Hurts. He was Dak Prescott's quarterback coach at Mississippi State. He worked with De'Aaron King when he was a freshman at Houston. Kyle Trask at Florida. No one would say Kyle Trask was like this really hyped guy. He helped turn him into a Heisman contender, right? So he's a guy who checks all those boxes. I think Joe Moorhead, certainly you can see like they've produced a ton of explosive plays when he was at Penn State. The Oregon offense was somewhat explosive, not as explosive, but still, like you saw him, like Tyler Show, never even unheard of since he left Oregon, but was 15th in passer rating that year that he worked with Joe Moorhead. Anthony Brown was like a nobody dude at Boston College. He was just whatever. He got better. He was better there, right? Trace McSorley was a top 15 quarterback in college football. Trace McSorley does not have top 15 type of talent. He wasn't a guy who was very highly recruited. He thrived under Joe Moorhead. I think you see Moorhead too. He's been a guy who's been like, he's heavy pass here. He's heavy run here. He's a guy who's adapted, basically brought in a huge part of the RPO game is from him, right? Where he brought it and what he did it for him. He's a guy will adjust to the talent. So that's not a question, right? So he's a guy who kind of checks all those boxes. I think like Sean Lewis, who's at Colorado right now, and like we said with Moorhead, we don't know if he's going to be interested. He just took that job at Colorado. He might not be, whatever. In saying that, he's a guy who's, adapt to the personnel. Well, he was a heavy run guy at Kent State, right? Because they run veer and shoot. It's a different type of game, but still, they were like, I think that's the kind of thing you could fit into what Notre Dame does, right? He's had like his two quarterbacks that he had at Kent State, all, in the 3 years that they played, all ranked in the top 20 according to PFF's grades, right? Pretty good, right? So he's a guy that, and they've been extremely explosive, especially in the run game, right? One of the most explosive teams from scrimmage. So he's another guy who kind of checks those lists. I mean, I think those guys kind of stand out for me as like kind of checking all those boxes. I think I really like Brian Lindgren from Oregon State too, is another guy that I think maybe their offense hasn't been as explosive, but he's a quarterback developer, has gotten the best out of certain guys. I think they've been adaptable. He's been a guy who's been play bigger and play heavier run game, but he's also kind of been in offenses where they've done a little bit more. He's a West Coast guy. He's been a pistol guy. He's done a little bit of different things there too. And then I think Ryan Grubb, who's the offensive coordinator at Washington, he's another guy who I think had great, track record with quarterbacks. Michael Penix was like, he was done kind of thing. All of a sudden he goes there. He's one of the top quarterbacks in college football last year. He did a great job with Jake Haener at Fresno State. He's had success. They were like, I think they were 8th in explosive passing plays last year. They're a team that they were like super heavy pass, but he hasn't always been a super heavy pass guy. I think that was kind of more suited a thing, but also a ton of tight end usage. They top 2 tight ends caught 60 balls for them last year. That's also like a thing where you're like, okay, that's something you could see at Notre Dame too. So I think there's definitely some good candidates out there. And I mean, there's probably guys that I'm not even mentioning that could probably be there too. But to me, a lot of those guys check all those boxes.
Yeah. I'm going to go to this question from Jude Seymour. So we just went over which coordinator candidates on the short list could also handle the quarterback coaching duties as Reese did, which would require an additional hire. So I think we just went over, I think, some of our favorites as far as who could handle the quarterback coaching piece of it. And then who would require an additional hire. So I had an idea. So I don't imagine. So it seems that the Cincinnati Bengal defensive coordinator is a finalist for the Arizona Cardinals job. And the idea and the thought is if he gets that job, he's going to want to bring Al Golden over as his defensive coordinator, in which case, Al Golden, there would be an opening on the defensive staff for Notre Dame, right? Now let's assume that Let's say Marcus Freeman takes a shot at an outside hire somewhere. He has like a favorite. Like, let's just say Jim Leonard for the sake of argument. Has a favorite. Jim Leonard says, I don't want to do that. Right. So Marcus Freeman says, okay, I can go search for a candidate and bring in like a fourth defensive scheme in 4 years for this team, or I can hire internal. Let's say it's Mike Mickens, right? And Mike Mickens is the DC. And you say, you know what, Brian Mason, you're going to work with linebackers. Marcus Freeman's going to work with linebackers, and we're going to bring a GA. So basically, you don't fill his spot with Al Golden's spot with an extra coach, right? Let's say they do that.
Well, they have to hire an extra coach. You'd be one down. They'd have to hire somebody.
Well, wait. You then take that spot because you only have a certain amount, right? You only have a certain amount of coaches. You take that spot, you make it a quarterback coach. And then that allows you to hire someone like the Kansas OC or Atkins or whoever. Like, could you see that being a possibility? I mean, I think it would require, like, in my opinion, it would require Notre Dame missing on some of the more preferred candidates, probably.
So you're saying add an extra guy on offense? Is that
yes? Yeah, I'm saying. I am
100% against this right now.
Tell me why.
Okay. Well, one, you're taking away Brian Mason as the best special teams coordinator.
Well, no, he can still do it. He can still do it.
I know, but if you're adding on to him, that's not a good thing. Like, if he's already helping out on defense, that's fine. But like, you're adding on to him and not adding an extra voice. Defense always gets the shaft when it comes to extra coaches. They've traditionally had less coaches on the defensive side. And so now that they added an extra in the more recently is when they had, 10 staff instead of 9, that was like, okay, now defense finally gets an extra guy. Because before it used to be D-line, linebackers, DBs. That was what you had there. Yeah. And that was it. Right. And now they have more there. I don't think they need, I mean, I'm fine with them. I think 100% if they just say they hire some, or they do that thing inside, they have to hire like a full-time linebacker coach. And also too, no offense to Brian Mason, maybe he would be a tremendous linebacker coach, but like, that's not something that like you just want to give to somebody. Like, you gotta get, especially when you saw how the linebackers played last year, right? Yeah. Like, you need to get it right. You need to get something there. You need somebody there. I don't mind them going after someone who's not a quarterback guy for this job and then shuffling some offensive stuff. Like, I don't think that's bad if that happened. And sometimes it happens and then somebody is out of a job, and I'm not promoting that someone should get fired or switched around to an off-field role or anything like that. But I'm just saying, you got to hire whoever is best. So if, say, I don't think he's really on the short list. I just like him. Is that Andy Kotelnicki from Kansas and what they've done there, and he's an O-line guy. So if they decided to go with someone like that, right? Someone like that who was an O-line guy, who was a receiver guy, right? Who was whatever, and then they just kind of shifted it around and then brought in a quarterback guy. Still, that's fine. But I do think you can kind of see, based on what we were just mentioning with all those guys who kind of check those boxes, there's a lot of good quarterback guys out there. Yeah. So I mean, you kind of have to be blown away by somebody else for them to go in another direction. So, I mean, I guess you could say like, you could have something there, like how Chip Long was a tight end guy or whatever, right? You could have something like that.
Well, but he had
definitely not Chip Long. Yeah, that's what I mean, right? You could have that, and you could hire another guy that you think could be a young quarterback guy, and you're like, this guy's probably going to be the OC one day or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And the one thing people remember is that everybody thinks that you hire an OC, it's like, man, this guy's going to be here forever. It's like Tommy Rees, 3 years. That's like pretty long. You know what I mean? Like that's in general. I think if you look at, say, who was the longest tenured BK coordinator? I think like Reese and Clark Lee at 3 years.
Reese, Clark Lee. I mean, Denbrock was probably.
Denbrock was like 3 years basically
Yeah.
where he's the thing. What's his face? Diaka was 4 years as the DC, and that was the peak. And I think that's about as long as you're gonna get, unless like you bring in, because even like Al Golden, that was one of the reasons people thought that like, I mean, like, yeah, I mean, I don't even think he wants to be a head coach anymore. But it turns out he came, and then he's like, he might want to go back to the NFL, right? So if that's what he, it's really hard to find somebody who's going to stick and just be like, I want to be at Notre Dame. I want to be, I want to be here for the long term. Like it, even if you can get like Kirby Smart at Alabama was like a really, really long time. And it was because he chose to stay. And he basically waited for the Georgia job to open up and then took it. So I don't know if like you almost have to get somebody who's just like, I'm waiting for this other job to open up. So it's really hard to get somebody who's like a long-term guy.
Yeah. I mean, I think Reese was, it doesn't really matter because he's gone, but I think Reese a little different because no one got the job as a 27-year-old. You know what I mean? Like I could have seen that lasting longer. But I mean, obviously it didn't, so it's not important. I mean, and two, like, okay, so I think of all the people that we've talked about here, I think the one person who is likely to last the longest is probably Moorhead, because I could see him being like, you know what? I'm totally cool just being
running an offense.
Notre Dame's offensive coordinator, right? Like, so someone said like, there was a comment earlier, like, oh, the Bama, the Bama, like no one's turning down the Bama offensive coordinator job. It's like, well, Moorhead did. They asked him and he was like, I'm all set, actually. Yeah. So he didn't want that. But if he's interested in Notre Dame, that tells me it's like, hey, I want this. I like this job. And maybe he wants to do that specific job. I could see him being around like with success, right? Whereas like, Sean Lewis, right? If Notre Dame blows it out in the next 2 years, he's going to get a head coaching job, right? That just will happen. Probably same thing for Brian Johnson. Who else did we talk about? Brian Grubb, like maybe the same deal, right? The Oregon State OC, right? So I everyone else I could kind of see like if the results, if it's a good hire and the results come as they expected, they'll probably go, right? And so that's just going to have to be something that Marcus Freeman is prepared for. But then that's also like Alabama, right? Like that's operating from a position of strength, not a position of weakness, right? Like, yeah, because then it's so easy to have someone come in and just like people are just calling you like, hey, I want to come because this guy just got a big job, right? So that's what makes it super easy to fill the position. The question from Westwood Manor Films: has Brian Johnson actually called plays before? So was he the main play caller at Florida?
I don't think he was the main play caller at Florida, but he was the main play caller at Utah. I think he was the main play caller at Houston. So he's called plays before. So yeah, I don't think that's like a thing that you worry about. And the other thing is that, I mean, there's a million guys that had never called plays before, or never like Clark Lee never called the defense before. I think it was pretty good. There's a million of those guys.
It's kind of different.
Defense
and offense.
But it's not that different. If you're the guy who's actually like, running things or whatever, it's like, it's different in how you set things up, but it's like, it's not different in how you like, this is, I mean, you're the voice, you're the main person. So like, there's a bunch of guys like Tommy Rees never called plays. I mean, considering when you think of that in that 2020 season, I think he did a pretty good job for a first-time play call. Like there's a lot of guys like that. I mean, and obviously everybody wants somebody who has this long track. That's why Joe Moorhead is like the kind of the perfect guy. You're like, man, this guy's been calling plays for a decade and he's had like big success, right? And it's also kind of like one of the things with like Andy Ludwig, who's the Utah guy. I mean, the guy's been an OC for like 20 years, right? So yeah, I get it. Like, and he's had success, right? But my question with a guy like Andy Ludwig is like, well, he's been this guy. They never had a top 10 offense wherever he's gone. He's had a bunch of top 20 offenses, but never a top 10. And he's had some kind of ups and downs, whatever. And he's 58 years old, never been to a place like Notre Dame. I mean, that's like, how's he going to fit and all that too? But it's all this kind of thing. It's like, no matter what decision Marcus Freeman makes, it's like, it is about what they've done before and that kind of thing too. But it's also, what are they going to do with Notre Dame's team? What are they going to do with the guys that they have now? Like, that's the most important thing.
Yeah. I mean, there's also like, okay, Tommy Rees never called plays, right? But he also had Brian Kelly, who was an offensive coach. So like, if Marcus Freeman brought in Mike Mickens to run the defense, he's never obviously called plays, but he has Marcus, right?
Chip Long never called plays before Notre Dame too.
Right. Yeah. But Brian Kelly, right? Like, so like, I don't know. You cannot have someone who's never called plays with Marcus Freeman as the head coach, because he can't help out on that side of the job. And I also think that's kind of like Sean Lewis.
I don't believe that. I believe you can.
It's not that it can't work, but that's a big risk now. That is a big risk. Like I think, and not just that, but it's like, okay, Sean Lewis and Joe Moorhead, someone like Jason Candle, right? These guys, not just offensive coordinators, not just quarterback coaches, head coaches, right? Used to being in complete control of everything. And I do think that carries a lot of weight with this Notre Dame team, that like Marcus can say, hey, you're in complete control of the offense. Go.
Yeah. Okay. So here, I'm just going to bring up two guys right now that were Mark Stoops, defensive coach, hired Liam Cohen, never called plays before. I mean, the guy basically like turned around Kentucky's offense, then got the whatever, and is now back, whatever. He's Jeff Hafley, never called the defense before. Ryan Day, offensive coach, brought him in to fix their defense in 1 year. I mean, whether or not he's a good head coach, that's a totally different story, but did a great job as defense coordinator, running their defense, whatever. Like, it just all depends on if it's the right guy. I'm not saying like that's easily like when I'm sure when Ryan Day hired Jeff Hafley, like Ohio State fans were like, what? This is not good. Like, why didn't we get such and such who's got this and that, whatever? Like, I get it, right? Like, that's why there's other people who are higher on the list. That's why people are like, I want Joe Moorhead. I want, this guy. I want Andy Ludwig. I want this. I want this. Like, they want people who have done it before. And everybody kind of, I mean, I think most people would choose that, right? But it's like, you could have went with, you could go with the guy. There's always the safer choice. And I think that Marcus Freeman needs to look at all that? Yeah, because he only gets one shot at this. And we've mentioned this before, right? So he only gets one shot, which is why it's like, if he decided to just say, Jared Parker, yeah, you're going to be calling plays. It's like, well, he better have the utmost confidence it's going to work out, because that is going to look bad if it doesn't, right? Like, it's going to look bad, and he'll just immediately go on the hot seat, because he can't. It's like something that you can't have like paged for, and then all of a sudden he would have to like fire his friend if that's the case, right? So that's, and like BK because he had enough leeway that he could have the 2016 debacle and have the fact that Brian Van Gorder lasted for as long as he did, like basically was only because it was his friend, right? But like at just about any other circumstance, if Brian Van Gorder was hired, he would have been gone after 1 year, right? That's how it would have been. And so you don't want to ever get into a situation like that. And if that's the kind of thing where Marcus Freeman brings somebody on and they struggle in year one, that's like, and they keep him on, that like dooms his tenure, basically. Like, that means like better warm up the head coach hot list, right? Because that's the way people are going to view it. So it's all a risk. And I'm not saying that I would be brave enough for it to make that higher and whatever, because I think it could go really bad.
Yeah.
But at the same time, Marcus Freeman has to make whoever he thinks is the best fit for Notre Dame, and which is why, like, I mean, a lot of our list could be like completely wrong, and it could be somebody who's not even on there, and that's something like I think even if you think about it, because Al Golden was a hire out of left field. Really,
you had didn't you have him on your?
I had him, but I'm just saying, like, he wasn't a guy who was people weren't talking about him for other coordinator spots. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like it wasn't like, well, Alabama's looking at Al Golden too. It wasn't like anything like that. Like where how Marcus Freeman was when he was a coordinator, it was like, well, LSU wants him, and Oregon's trying to get him, and Notre Dame. So it's like it was like almost like a bidding war to do it. It's just like different where it's like, you know, you're still making that call, and I don't think it has gone bad with Golden or whatever, but it's just one of those things where if, say, like this year, Golden doesn't go back to NFL, he stays, and then the red zone defense is also like, wow, they moved up to 128th in red zone touchdown percentage. Like, I mean, that's not going to cut it. Like, people will revolt, right? Like, that's just how it is. So that's why it's like you take those chances, and it's like it can go well, but it also can come back to burn you.
Yeah. So, okay, do you have someone in mind who hasn't called plays?
No, not really. No, to be honest, like I put people, I'm just saying, like, I put people on my list of like guys. So like, I think it's interesting. Like, I do think, I think there is something to it. And people will just say, like, if you had dinner once with Sean McVay, all of a sudden, then you get to become a head coach or an offensive coordinator. That's like
that was Liam Cohen, right? Wasn't that his?
He was like somehow involved in that tree or whatever. But it's like, well, that worked out pretty good. And if you look at the track record of McVay and Shanahan, guys, it's been pretty good. They've had pretty good. They've had a lot of success. Definitely on offense, right? Like, you can say, like, I mean, jury's out on Mike McDaniel if he's going to be a really good head coach. I think he's a pretty good offensive mind.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. I mean, speaking of explosiveness.
Yeah. Right. So, so Mike,
I'm the head coach for the Vikings.
Yes.
I don't remember his name, but O'Connell. Yeah. He was the Rams something.
So when I'm thinking of in that kind of way, and I'm not saying that I have no idea. I put them on my original list because I was like, I'm like, these guys, other people think they're pretty good, and they've risen up enough to the point where they're getting interviews and stuff like that too. So I look at the Niners, and they have this Bobby Slowick, who is he's considered like kind of the next Mike McDaniel. Like, he's the next kind of boy genius type dude for them. I'm like, well, I mean, the other boy genius or whatever, it's like, I think that's a guy I'd like to talk to. And I heard, you know, he might be like maybe D'Amico Ryans, who got the Texans head coach job, might hire him as offensive coordinator. And maybe that's the kind of thing. But like, I don't know. It seems like I like what San Francisco does on offense. I like their ideas. I think some of the stuff can kind of fit with some of the personnel that Notre Dame has too. So I'm like, that's somebody I would want to talk to. He could be like maybe one of those guys. I think so. And I brought up like the McVay thing. So Zach Robinson, which is so funny because he was this guy who was, people, college football fans remember him. He was like Oklahoma State quarterback. He was pretty good, right? And then he was in like the private quarterback coaching game. And then he was like getting guys ready for the draft. I believe, I'm pretty positive, whatever. I wrote it down and maybe I misremembered it, but I'm pretty positive he was the guy who worked out DeShone Kizer for his pro day at Notre Dame when I was there. And then he eventually got into, you know, the NFL, and now he's the quarterback coach for He's been on staff with the Rams for the last 4 years, and he was the guy who was in contention for the LA Chargers job. They went to Kellen Moore, right? So, I mean, McVay's offense, I think there's a lot of guys who branch out. I think there's the track record of these guys hiring really smart people and developing coaches. So those are guys that, I mean, or are they going to be at Notre Dame long-term? Probably not, but none of these guys are really going to be at Notre Dame long-term, as we kind of discussed before. So, I mean, I'd want to talk to those guys.
Yeah.
I'd want to talk to those guys, kind of figure out where they're at, because maybe, maybe not, but maybe they are like a true home run guy that all of a sudden could take like Sam Hartman and the offense and all of a sudden Notre Dame's a top 5 offense because these guys came in with the right ideas to help get there.
Yeah. Brennan McAleenan asks, if Notre Dame has $3 million to match for Reese, why is the Notre Dame OC search not including OCs at other major programs? Why doesn't Notre Dame poach someone like Mike Yurcich or a similar Power 5 OC? So okay, they're reportedly, I mean, I don't know. Sean Lewis's name has been thrown out, right? And he's an OC at Colorado, just hired, right? And so if he's an option, since he just got hired, if he's an option, why isn't Garrett Riley an option, right? Why isn't anyone an option? Like why is it like, oh, he's, this X guy is, and like someone like Jeff Lebby, like there might be some like HR concerns with the whole Baylor thing and all that stuff, right? So that throws it out. But if it's like, why should Notre Dame be limited by like guys who are like Joe Moorhead, who it's like, at Akron, he's interested in Notre Dame, kind of plucking, like the Jason Candles, like taking a MAC coach. Like, why not just say, you know what? The hottest guy is Garrett Riley. We like him a lot. We're calling him. Here's $3 million or whatever, $2.5 million, whatever the number is. Yeah. Like, why isn't that more of an something that is even more than like just something that we're a hypothetical that we're just talking about? Like, why isn't that something that I guess fans should be like, hey, you should be doing this? Like Alabama's throwing themselves around. Like Notre Dame needs to do the same thing. Like, why isn't that more of something that's kind of out there?
I mean, I think what Brandon brings up, like, who's on that list other than Mike Yurcich? He's the only kind of name that I've seen that has been on, like, because most of the best offenses are the guys like who are head coaches that are running the offense. So like
that is an issue. I mean, go get Lincoln Riley. Go get him. $10 million. Come over.
And I also think like so. I mean, Clemson did that with Garrett Riley, right? They went and got TCO. I mean, TCO just went to the national championship, and then he just left to go for Clemson for more money and to coach better players, whatever. They did that. So I guess Notre Dame could be like, well, we're going over the top with Garrett Riley. We're going to give him like this much money or whatever. But it's like, well, Clemson could just match it. And it's like, while you're wasting time doing that, you could have been interviewing somebody else, right? So that's part of it, right? So I think that's part of it. And I don't know. I mean, I can't say with like, say, Mike Yurcich, like, I don't know, maybe Marcus Freeman isn't a fan of Mike Yurcich or whatever. I don't know. Like,
but the idea of it, right? Like,
yeah, the idea of it, I think is fine. But also too, like, I really want to know, like, who are these people that everybody wants to go poach? Because I think it's like a fun idea in practice, but then that is like Andy Ludwig is that kind of an example, right? Like that's like, I mean, he's a good Power 5 offensive coordinator. So if they really want to do that, I'm sure they could do that, right? I'm sure they could do that. If they really want Sean Lewis, they could go over the top and say like, listen, man, you just went to Colorado. Well, we got a better roster. Come here right now. You just stay in the Midwest. Like, here we go. Like that could happen, right? But I don't know, like, what's the list of guys that are home run guys out of that? I just don't know if there is somebody. I think that is what I'm not reading his whole thing, but Ryan Grubb is that, right?
Like Ryan Grubb, the tires are being kicked, I think
it's just, that's the kind of thing. But then also too, with Ryan Grubb, that is the kind of thing where it could just be like a 2-second conversation where someone's reached out and be like, hey, I know you already turned down Bama or you turned down this and that. Are you just going to stay there? You're not interested in anything? No, I'm not interested. Okay. That's the end of that conversation. Right. Like, so I don't know that that's, that's why I don't know that they're not doing those kind of things, but I just don't know. I just think like, so if I'm looking at like, there's a lot more of those defensive coordinator guys that I think they could go out and be like, oh, you really want to poach some other Power 5 guys? There's a lot more of those established guys that I think kind of make sense for it than there are the OC guys. So I think that's part of it. And also, I just wanted to mention too, because I think Raider Biggs, whatever, mentioned this thing about like Freeman on the. I didn't want that to come off as flippant. We were just talking about like Marcus Freeman is not on the hot seat at all. We're not suggesting that at all. Just, we just said that if you make a hire and it's like an inexperienced guy and it doesn't go good, that's how you get yourself on the hot seat, right? That's a real thing, right? That's a definite thing not just Notre Dame, like, well, Nick Saban can do that. Well, Nick Saban has built up enough trust that he can just do whatever he wants. That's why Nick Saban can, the school for wayward coaches, he can just hire these guys who like have had a lot of problems before. Well, it doesn't matter because they're just like, well, Saban, whatever he says goes. Well, Marcus Freeman isn't at that level yet. He can't just hire anybody without, if it doesn't go well, it's whatever. If say Sark didn't go well for Saban, he can just fire him and move on to the next guy. And he's maybe he gets the talk radio in Tuscaloosa is a little bit harder on him, but he's still got all those national championships. So I think he'd be fine.
All right. So a lot of people are mentioning Joe Brady. And I'll just throw up this one from Travis Rivas. Notre Dame needs to do whatever possible to convince Joe Brady. I want someone to maximize our talent at wide receiver and running backs out of the backfield. So I've heard no juice about Joe Brady other than people bringing him up. I know you put him on your list. I think there are a lot of reasons why he might not want to do it, which like Joe Brady has talked about, not specifically Notre Dame, but like, I don't want to recruit. I don't like that stuff. And frankly, like post LSU 2019, not a ton of success. So there's that. I would say if he was interested, I think Notre Dame should go after him, frankly. What's funny too is I think Sam Hartman is a poor man's version of
Joe Burrow. Really?
Joe Burrow.
Okay.
In
Good
style.
thing Matt's not listening in on.
I hope he is listening. I said poor man's. Matt needs to settle down.
Yeah, no.
I think like if you watch them play, like in style, they're very similar. Like they both take shots. They both take chances. Notre Dame doesn't have Justin Jefferson. They don't have Terrace Marshall. They don't have. I can't think of the other guy's name. Number one. Why can't I think of his name? It's so stupid.
Jamar Chase.
Jamar Chase.
Real good thing Matt's not listening.
Yeah. Right? I hope he is. He can get mad at me. But it's like he doesn't have that. But I just think in terms of the concepts and the type of quarterback that Sam Hartman is, like they both kind of move similar. Joe Burrow is better at basically everything that as Sam Hartman, but like Sam Hartman's still capable of, making throws, right? Reading things the way Joe Burrow does. I think they have kind of sort of similar. Like Joe Burrow can escape the pocket when it's called for. I think Sam Hartman can do the same thing. They both want to take shots. I think they see the game in a similar way. I don't think they can execute the game in a similar way. I guess maybe that's a better way to put it.
I think that's fair.
I think that's fair to say, and Matt doesn't have to get mad at me. And if he does, I don't care because I can say what I want. All right. Let's see. We've got some. So wait, what do you think about that? What do you think about that, Jamie? Joe Brady, the concept, the idea.
I think he's very similar to Chip Kelly, in that Chip Kelly was a guy who didn't like recruiting and still doesn't like recruiting. Look at their recruiting rankings. at UCLA. They're not. I mean, there's a reason why they just go heavy into the portal and get a lot of guys, right? Like, I think what Jude put up about, I don't know who he got that quote from, but that is very, that's Chip Kelly. He likes the evaluating part. He loves that part of it. He doesn't like the actual recruiting part of it, which the relationship building and stuff. And that's, I mean, part of it. But, our good buddy Chris Wilson, he, mentioned that, like, in terms of when you're looking at, like, say 24/7 recruiter rankings or Rav's recruiter or whoever's recruiting rankings, a lot of OCs aren't on there, right? Because they're not really as involved as you expect. They're mostly involved with just the quarterback, and maybe they chip in with stuff, but they're not like over the top, especially when you have like a head coach who's really involved in everything, like Marcus Freeman is. So I think, it's important to kind of get somebody who's the right guy, the right guy you want for it. Okay. Thanks, Jude, for mentioning that it's from.
Appreciate you, Jude.
Yeah. But I just think that it's one of those things, like, if he really doesn't like it, then it's like, well, does he just not want to be involved in the college game at all? Does he not, whatever, right? And that's like a pretty big hurdle. And then it's like, well, does he want to live in South Bend, Indiana? Does he want all these, like, there's all these things. Does he just want to coach in the NFL the rest of the thing, right? The rest of the way, right? Like,
you know how you find that out?
You ask him.
Call him up.
Yeah. So I don't know, right? So it's one of those things. It's like, I think if Joe Brady were to be Notre Dame's next offensive coordinator, it would be like one of the most intriguing hires, because guess what? He's the only guy who was part of the best college football offense of all time on the list. So, okay.
He's the only one on the list. That's true.
He's the only one on the list who's part of that. So, but I mean, easily there's more guys on that who are probably on Notre Dame's list that have less questions about them than Joe Brady. And I guess that's the best way to put it for me.
Yeah. Seek and Destroy. What do you guys think of Brian Johnson, current quarterback coach of Philadelphia Eagles? We mentioned him earlier in the show, so I recommend going back and checking that out. I think was the we think a lot. I think that would be a good choice for Notre Dame.
Probably be one of the closest to a home run hire out of the bunch.
Lewistown Lady Panther basketball. Joe Moorhead is the answer. So Lewistown Lady Panther basketball is fully on board with Joe Moorhead.
Go Panthers.
Go Panthers. Right. We wish you all great luck in the future. So Travis Rivas asked, do we know if Notre Dame is looking for offensive coordinator who also coaches the quarterbacks, or just be the OC? I think they would prefer someone was a quarterback coach focusing on the quarterback. I think if there's an obvious best candidate for Marcus Freeman and it wasn't a quarterback person, I think they would make it work. But ideally it would be the OC would be the quarterback coach. And then let's see, DT Karate. Is there an under the radar guy that would be a good fit? I think we've talked about that some. You mentioned Zach Robinson, who is, I think, is he currently with the Rams? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I think so.
Currently with the Rams, hasn't called plays. He kind of fits in that, Problem is with the Rams, there's not a lot of people calling plays because Sean McVay is the one who's calling plays. Maybe Notre Dame could call Sean McVay, right? Maybe he wants to get out of the pro game, and he would be great. I think if Notre Dame landed Sean McVay, I think that would be a home run for them. And
I would say it's pretty good hire.
And then Tommy Rees could be the Rams head coach because that he's wanting to go to the NFL. So that's where that is. Let's see. There's a comment by Brent Smith. Freeman is not going to hire a great X's and O's guy over a top-notch recruiter. So here's the thing about the X and O's comment here is when you say X's and O's, I'm thinking production, right? I think he might. I think he like honestly.
I think he absolutely would.
If you're
going to do it, it'll be a coordinator.
If you have a coordinator who has offenses that do numbers, and Joe Brady might be that guy, right? Like, look, the offense that he was a part of with LSU did numbers. I mean, there's just no question, right? And that was his last college job too. He went to the NFL after that, right? And so I think if you have a college guy like that, that's more than X's and O's. Like, to me, someone like Lindgren, like, that's more X's and O's. Like, for me, that's like in the film room. I see what you're doing. I like what you're doing. And I think that would be a good fit here. But there's not here's your top 10 offense that I put out that you can see. He doesn't have that. Like, you're projecting a little bit. Like, that's an X's and O's guy. So, like, to me, if you're going to hire Lindgren, then you better be sure. Like, I also think this guy's a bang recruiter, like, because I think you do need to have that, right? There's no proven I can do numbers at a major school. Therefore, it needs to be like, I can also recruit, right? Yeah. With Joe Brady, he's done numbers already. Like, you don't have to project that stuff. That's more than X's and O's. Yeah. I did it. Right. So,
and I think one of the things too is, with this, if you don't want to have, obviously you don't want to have any weak recruiters on the staff. But I do think that there's a good chance you're going to have, no matter who you hire, it's going to be an unproven recruiter in terms of recruiting to Notre Dame, like the uniqueness of Notre Dame, the kind of like place where Notre Dame is and the type of recruits that you are recruiting compared to, say, like if you hire somebody from a Pac-12 school, it's just different recruiting to Notre Dame, right? Like, it's, if you hire somebody from the SEC or whatever, or someone who's coming from the NFL, it's just it's harder. It's more difficult. So like, imagine Joe Brady might be like, man, I love this receiver. And he might be like, this is the guy, we need to get him. Like, yeah. And it's like, guess what? The guy's got a 1.9 GPA. He's not coming to Notre Dame, right? Like, it's just, that's a thing at Notre Dame, right? So it's like, I don't know. I don't want to say like it's going to be, I don't think you would ever hire anyone who's like, this guy is a terrible recruiter, terrible evaluator, or whatever. Like, I mean, definitely recruiter, right? Like, he's not going to be someone who like has an actual, like, doesn't want to do it. So if he hired Joe Brady, he'd be like, well, I mean, we got to get this quarterback. Like, this is the guy. I don't care. Put all your effort into this. I'm sure that would be kind of the message. But I just think, like, you can't just hire, someone. So, like, you could say, like, Clark Lee, if you're going to compare him and Marcus Freeman, you maybe say, like, I think Clark Lee's, like, maybe a better strategic defensive mind than Marcus Freeman. But Marcus Freeman is just so much better of a recruiter that it's just like, it's not that comparable, right?
Right.
And so you have to weigh each and every thing and what's important and what's not.
Yeah. Yeah. P. Deriska is bringing up some points about Joe Brady. So Brady's there 1 year. The table was set, risky hire. He put up some other messages as well, but this is kind of the gist of it. Look, he's bringing up, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and of course Joe Burrow. Like, so look, I don't think if Notre Dame wants to hire Joe Brady, I would not predict that Sam Hartman would throw 60 touchdown passes. Like, I would not.
Yeah.
Right? But it's like, maybe with slightly lesser talent, instead of it being 60, maybe it's 40 touchdown passes, right? It's like, I would take that. Like, if Sam Hartman throws 40 touchdowns next year, like, I would take it, right? That would be good. So it's like, the reason that they were the best offense ever is because of those guys. Still a good offense, right? Like, still would have been a good offense. So that's kind of how I see it. Jamie, any final comments before we get going here? Call it
I guess, like, I mean, probably if people listen to this, they're like, wow, I don't have any more clarity on who's it going to be. And I think because we don't really have the clarity on who it's going to be. And I think, it's fun to talk about all these guys. And I hope that on Thursday we kind of because I have a feeling we're going to be talking about offensive coordinator a lot then too.
Oh yeah.
So I hope we have a little bit more clarity then. But my guess would be that probably next Tuesday is when we're going to have a much better idea of who either it is or who it could be with a finalist kind of list.
Narrowed down. So Travis Reeves asked the timetable. I would think by next Tuesday we would at least have, like you said, more clarity at what Notre Dame wants to do, where this is headed. Raider Biggs, we talked about Byron Leftwich a ton in the beginning, the first 15, 20 minutes about Byron Leftwich. So you're going to want to check that out. You want to go back there. All right, we're going to leave it there. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Well, hold on. Tyler Borgman asked one more question. We'll do that. Does Freeman have to do a lot of reaching out, or is there significant people also reaching out to him? I think it's both. Honestly, I think a lot of people have been. I think there's been a lot of interest based on what I've heard. There's been a lot of interest in.
I think there's always a lot whenever there's a thing, which is why too. When you're some of these names that pop up, you're like, what? Why? I mean, we were talking before the show when people were like Chris Ash, and it's like Chris Ash. Why is he even in the mix? He's in the mix because he's trying to get his name in the mix. That happens with a lot of guys.
Why would the quarterback coach of the Eagles leave to coach at Notre Dame? Because it's better to be the play caller than to just be a position coach. That's why.
And maybe he wants to be a head coach in college.
Maybe he wants to be a head coach. I don't know. Maybe he loves Notre Dame. And one more thing on Leftwich, Notre Dame is trying to keep this very close to the vest. And so the fact that it's leaked that Leftwich
that's not good. That's not a good sign on his part, I think.
Right. That's probably indicative of something. So, all right, we're gonna leave it there. Thank you everyone for tuning in. We are going to be back at least on Thursday. If there's anything breaking tomorrow, we'll try to go live tomorrow, and we'll go from there. So, thank you everyone for tuning in. If you liked what you heard, hit the like, hit the subscribe button. You want to hit the notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you don't see it on Twitter or something like that. And you're going to want to stay tuned in to irasportsdaily.com as well. We got a lot of breaking news, a lot of features and that sort of thing. So you want to tune in there. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you very, very soon.